So there's been this discussion in Europe about homosexuals and how they should be punished in Islam. Let me just clarify. Somebody sent me a message saying I think in Denmark, this is quite a hot topic right now, that people believe in Islam you're meant to chuck homosexuals off buildings. This is nonsense, people. Utter nonsense. Let me just clarify this. Right now, this thing, what is this about? And there's a viral clip, there's a clip that went viral about in the UK, some woman teaching in an Islamic school in a burqa, saying that we all know that, you know, gays and whatever, they're meant to be chucked off a cliff. These people that say these things do more damage to Islam than 30 Dajjals put together could possibly do, honestly. These people really need to get a grip of themselves and study Islam. It is not true, people. First of all, the Prophet never spoke about homosexuals. Okay, let's get the facts clear. These hadiths that they're bringing in Abu Dawood and everything, that man amila amala qawmi Lut, whosoever acts, does an action of the people of Lut, right? This is, by the way, on a side note, I think it's so raw. If I can just use the word, another word ain't coming to my mind. It's so raw and so unacceptable, but it's so widespread that homosexuals in the Islamic literature are called Luti, like the associates of Lut. And it's just like, this was the name of a prophet. And it's just such a disservice to Lut alayhi salam. Nobody would ever name their child Lut now. Like, that's never going to happen, because they've used the term to mean gay, right? So, anyway, but that's a different discussion. But, so all these hadith, every single hadith to do with this homosexuality is da'if. Da'if, people. It is da'if. There isn't a single Sahih hadith that the Prophet spoke about this. Okay, I'm just saying about the Prophet. Then there's some discussion, did the companions speak about this? Now people say Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an, they take back 5 different varying narrations to Sayyidina Ali. That Sayyidina Ali said, oh, execute them. He said, chop their head off. No, he said, throw them off a cliff. No, he said, burn them. No, he said this. I don't believe any of these to be authentic. I believe, but if people were going to take them authentically, as the words of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu an, this was referring, if they were, that he had said, we're going to kill these particular people. We have to look at who was Sayyidina Ali talking in his lifetime dealing with. And his greatest problem were the Khawarij. Those people who were massacring and butchering people. And they were they were like the fathers of, they were like ISIS on steroids. They were the fathers of this kind of ISIS movement. And they're known as the Khawarij, like an extremist group. Anybody who commits a sin is a kafir. So to them, the companions were kafirs. So they were the target of Sayyidina Ali's that battle and struggle. If anything, somebody wanted to believe that Sayyidina Ali was speaking about certain culprits from that group, that they needed to be executed, and maybe whether they were also accused of homosexuality or not, I don't know, some amongst them. But generally, just about homosexuality, not about them, I don't believe these to be authentic. Okay, and that's a different discussion that someday we can go through the chains and I can show you why they're weak. Now, the scholars, when asked about this, Imam Malik and other scholars said, we believe, like Imam Malik, some people transmit that he said, oh, I've heard it still being said. And I believe that this comment of his is dismissive. He said, I heard it still being said that they ought to be stoned like the way people of zina are stoned and stuff like this. Now, to me, this, I heard it being said, was a dismissive way. Because rather than, why not him just say it? That's one thing. Now, other scholars said that, look, this hasn't been discussed, therefore we're going to just treat this like zina. This is the same ruling as zina. Like Imam Shafi'i, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and these scholars. Imam Abu Hanifa, other scholars like Ibrahim al-Nakha'i and other scholars like Al-Hakam and Zahiriyya, they said, look, this can't be a had in Islam because Islam never spoke about it. So yes, Imam Abu Hanifa said you can have ta'zir, you can punish these people if you want. If you felt this was a public indecency, you could punish this with a punishment that you come up with. But it couldn't be capital punishment, because in the Hanafi madhab, ta'zir doesn't reach the state of had. So that's the background. Now, people have started to say that there is ijma', that these people have, anybody who commits homosexuality deserves death. This is what they're saying. That is nonsense. That is nonsense. Okay, let me just clarify. And there's a quote from Ibn al-Qayyim, because we're down on time, but you can find it online. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, and Ibn Taymiyyah is one of the harsh people against all this homosexuality as well. But his student Ibn al-Qayyim goes on to say that we believe this is the greatest crime of humanity after disbelief. He says here, and it is arguably greater than murder. Honestly, I don't even know what to say to that. That is seriously misplaced. Honestly, these kind of things are disappointing statements. Disappointment isn't the word from Ibn al-Qayyim, who sometimes makes very interesting things. Who that on the left? There is nobody. Oh, you're talking about this thing. This is my couch. It's one of those reclining. So now Ibn al-Qayyim makes this statement saying that this is the greatest crime after disbelief is just sodomy. And he says sodomy with anybody or anything is just the greatest sin ever, and it's greater than murder, arguably. Which is ridiculous. And I don't want to go into a psychoanalysis right there, because I don't want to be disrespectful to Ibn al-Qayyim, but we know what psychoanalysis would kind of lead us to there. But this kind of thing is absurd. And people said nobody, first of all, no. Let me kind of just add something here. First of all, this is going to come as a real shock to people. There have actually even been scholars that have said homosexuality is fine, right? So I'm just going to scare the hell out of everybody by saying that. I'm not saying I agree with those scholars, but I'm saying that there have been scholars, great scholars, like Al-Qadi Yahya ibn Aktham, who was a great scholar. He was the Grand Supreme Judge of he was the Supreme Judge of Basra. He was a contemporary of Imam Ahmad, and he was a good friend of Imam Ahmad, and until their later years they've had a falling out, and then they no longer kind of talk to each other. He was a great scholar of hadith and fiqh, and he had his own way, like his own kind of way of madhab of doing things. Madhab usually implies a great following. It wasn't like that, but he was a man of great respect. He also was very close to the Caliph, Ma'mun. Hence, he became quite untouchable. So people say, why? Because he was very close to the Caliph. Ma'mun loved him. It's only in the last few months of Ma'mun's life that he had a falling out with him over the Quran creation issue. And they say Ma'mun kind of spoke a bit bad about him and distanced, but that was only for a few months, and then Ma'mun dies. But otherwise, Ma'mun loved him. Muhammad al-Amin, these people were really good with him. These were the caliphs, the sons of Harun al-Rashid. Now, he was openly homosexual, And he used to say that homosexuality, he used to prove it from the Quran. He used to say Allah says in the Quran, and he was a great faqih and judge of his time, and he used to use the verses of the Quran like Al-Malu wal-Banun Zinatul Hayatid Dunya, that wealth and boys are the beauty of this world. That was his take. And he also went to he used the verse of the Quran that Zuyyina linnasi hubbu shahwat, that these desires have been made pleasing to men, right? The following desires have been made pleasing to men. Minan nisa, of women, wal banin, and boys. Most people understood boys here to mean sons, but he said it was connected right with women. So he said that Allah is showing this, that this. So he was a clear proponent who openly argued, by the way. And the Caliph openly used to be homosexual as well. Like, in fact, Amin became strongly just homosexual, and Ma'mun was kind of both way. He was just sexual. He was just, I suppose it's fair game kind of thing. So they weren't really, like, he just wasn't fussed, boy, girl, you know, wife, cousin, same. He was kind of like that, so he didn't really have much of an issue. Now, and by the way, some ulama say that this Yahya ibn Aktham thing, these are lies attributed to him. So there are many scholars that try to dissociate between him and these opinions. But the truth is, this is so well known. Even many, people like even Dhahabi will transmit them. All these people will say that. Some people say, okay, maybe people exaggerated, but this was so well known about him. It wasn't like a little unknown. There was a poem. I had this poem somewhere that people had said about. This was slightly just before him. This was about Amin, who was, by the way, Amin was obsessed with this particular slave boy of his called Kawthar, right? And they said about him, and he gave him this position as well, and they said about him, Liwatul Khalifati U'juba wa a'jabu minhu khilaqul waziri. And they said that, the homosexuality of the wazir, of the Khalifa, is just, it's like a wonder of the world. It's an u'juba kind of thing. And most amazing than that, it's something so like, wow, what the hell? More astonishing than that is what the minister gets, the portion of the minister. خلاق الوزير فهذا يدوس وهذا يداس كذاك لعمري خلاف الأمور. He said, well, this one does and that one gets done. And he said, for God's sake, things have just taken a different turn. And he kind of like said about that. And by the way, in his time, in Amin's time and Ma'mun's time, eunuchs, like these kind of boys, slave boys that were, that were eunuchs. So for whatever reason, they were of no use sexually as active sexual males. Their prices massively increased, and you can check the books of history. Why? Because they were purchasing them like mad, and there was this craze about purchasing them. And so the reason I've said this is just to show that these things were, so when people say, and I'm not saying I agree with these things, and these may come as a shock, but these things were known. And there was actually a poem. The Khalifa Ma'mun once got Qadi Yahya, and because this was so well known that poets had made poems about him, the Caliph himself came across this poem. So he said to him once, to wind him up, he said Yahya, he said, what do you think about this poet who said, and the poet's name was something like Ahmad ibn Abi Nu'aym. And he said, he said, hey, who was the poet who said this? And he says the poem that Qadin, that a judge, yara al-hadda fi zina wala yara ala man yalutu min basi. He says, a judge who says that you should punish the adulterer, but he says there is no punishment for the one committing homosexuality. He says, oh, who was the poet that said that? And he was winding him up. And he follows on by saying, Qadi Yahya says, well, that was Ahmad ibn Abi Nu'aym. And he goes on to read another line of his where he's also attacking the caliph. And he says he's the one who also says this, by the way. So he kind of has a go at him. Now the reason I'm saying this is just to show you that, whoa. And he was a great scholar. Now after him, by the way, there was after him the great Yahya ibn Aktham, junior to him was, or a contemporary of him was the great Zahiri scholar, Dawood al-Zahiri. His son, Muhammad ibn Dawood, was also a known open homosexual. In fact, this book is an analysis of Dawood al-Asfahani's book, which was written for, if I can find it here, it was written for the boy who he was madly in love with, and his name was Muhammad ibn Jami' as-Saydlani. He was madly in love with him, and it was such a well-known thing. And in fact, they say about him that that this Ibn Jami', he used to be known by another name as well. Ibn Zukhruf. He was known by Ibn Zukhruf as well. That one day Ibn Zukhruf, like their love was so well known that one day Ibn Zukhruf was, they say, was looking in a mirror, and he thought to himself, wow, I am actually good looking. And he thought that I might give myself the evil eye. So he covered his face with a towel, and he walked to Ibn Dawood al-Asfahani, who was a great scholar, by the way, and Dawood says, why have you covered your face like this? He said that I saw myself with such beauty, such good looks, and I thought the first person to see me should be you. What's that? There's one of those like Shah Rukh Khan poses going on here. This is this one, love this one. What's that Faraz says? He says, Barbad karne ke aur bhi kahin raaste the Faraz. That there were many ways to destroy me, Faraz. That there were many ways if you thought about it. That barbad karne ke aur bhi kahin raaste the Faraz. Unko na jaane unhe mohabbat ka hi kyun khayal aaya. I wonder why they only thought of love. So this thing, you see, the reason I've said this is not to kind of upset people, but to burst the bubble. And even after, by the way, even after Ibn Dawood, who was madly in love with this person, Ibn Hazm's book, Tawqul Hamama, is full of this kind of stuff. My reason for saying this is, look, just chill out. You don't need to become gay. Nobody's telling you, and you won't become gay. You don't need to be so insecure about your sexuality. And I quoted the other day about, I quoted Imam Malik when he was asked in the Mudawwana, and I had it here, when he's asked in the Mudawwana about incestual relationships, which were a greater taboo. That people that are marrying their own mothers, and they're marrying their own sisters and daughters, and that's what they do. Should we, where possible, should we stop and intervene them? And Imam Malik said no. He said if that's their deen, and deen means way of life, let it be. He says Allah teaches you to be tolerant even of those who reject Him. So what about His laws? So This was the legend of Medina, people. So what I'm trying to say is that these things, by saying stuff like throw people off cliffs, what a stupid thing to say. What a stupid thing to say. Yes, in the past, certain scholars classed that as zina. The way they saw punishment for, and zina fell under public obscenity. That people that were causing public obscenities, and different places have punishments for these, which change over time. That they had a punishment for that. For some it was equal to zina. For some, they said, like Abu Hanifa, they said it was less than zina. Now others, and Ibrahim al-Nakhai and so on. Now, and then scholars along the centuries came, like Imam al-Burzuli, who said that in his day and age, 600 years ago, the hudud would change. All these punishments would change and reflect their age. And people continue to, and I've got a video on that on YouTube. So when you say these things, you make the damage you do to Islam, apart from just lying, and just attributing things to the Prophet and Allah that they have not said. And people say, yeah, but why did Allah punish the people of Lut so much? You see, what was the crime of the people of Lut? Yes, first of all, the verses speak of homosexuality, arguably about rape. They do speak about that. There is that angle. But what was their biggest crime? Their rejection of the Prophet, their torturing of the Prophet, them wanting to break into his house and kidnap and rape the guests that he had. The fact that they rejected the message of God in front of them, this was their primary crime. Not the fact, that's like saying, oh, the people of Madian were also destroyed, they also got punished. Yeah, but what did they used to do? That when they were buying and selling, they used to tip the scales. Yeah, but people are tipping the scales all the time. Do you hate them as well so much? Do you say when you sold that, you put the price of, the people of Madian, what did they do with Shu'aib? They got put, what did they do with Shu'aib? But their primary crime, the main crime, was how they rejected the Prophet of God. That was the main crime. Not, the other thing was also a crime. The fact that you tipped the scales and you conned the customers was also a crime. But was the destruction because of this? Now, where do you get that from? And that's just an opinion then. That's your inference. Allah didn't say that specifically. That's you inferring. So yes, look, because certain things are haram. First of all, not all scholars in Islam unanimously agreed that that was haram. Most outright majority did say it's haram. Some did disagree. So just being honest and being objective and transparent. Majority accepted it haram, and we accept it's haram. But you don't need to have that level of this hatred and saying things like this.